You know that feeling of being watched by an invisible crowd that expects you to smile, to celebrate, to demonstrate a happiness that simply doesn't exist within you. The calendar turned another page, fireworks exploded in the sky like empty promises, and now you find yourself before the mirror of a new year that demands from you a joy that your body and soul can no longer produce. It's as if the entire world had decided that this specific date should be a magic switch capable of erasing months or years of emotional exhaustion, accumulated disappointments, dreams that dissolved like wet paper in your hands. You feel the weight of social expectation pressing on your shoulders, whispering that you should be grateful, hopeful, renewed. But all you can feel is the echo of a fatigue so deep that not even sleep can cure it. This silent pressure for manufactured happiness is not just your fault or your weakness. It's the reflection of a system that doesn't understand that some of us arrive at the end of the year, not as winners celebrating achievements, but as survivors holding the pieces of ourselves that still remain. If you've made it this far because you recognized your own experience in these words, know that this is not a space of judgment, but of genuine understanding. This channel exists for those who feel displaced in a world that celebrates while you're still processing your own internal storms. If you subscribe now, you'll be joining a community of people who understand that true spirituality is not about forcing positive feelings, but about finding meaning even in the darkest moments of human existence. Here you'll find reflections that honor your real experience, not the one the world expects you to have. If this content brought some relief to your weary heart, please also leave your like, because that's how we manage to bring this message to other people who, like you, need to know they are not alone in their journey. The demand for joy at New Year's reveals one of the cruelest ironies of the modern human condition. The more happiness is demanded, the more distant we become from it. Franz Kafka, with his unique ability to see through social masks, would have perfectly understood this absurd situation in which we find ourselves. It's as if we were characters in one of his stories, trapped in an emotional, bureaucratic system where we need to present documents of happiness to have the right to exist socially. New Year's transforms into an invisible tribunal where you are simultaneously the defendant and the witness for the prosecution against yourself, questioning why you cannot feel what everyone else appears to feel with such ease. This pressure doesn't arise from emptiness. It feeds on a culture that has transformed emotions into consumer products, where happiness has become a commodity you should be able to buy with sufficient effort, gratitude, or positive thinking. The exhaustion you carry is not a character flaw. It's the natural result of living in constant discord with your own emotional needs. Imagine a musician forced to play a joyful symphony while his soul resonates in minor keys, each false note echoing like a betrayal of himself. The world around you dances to a rhythm you can no longer follow, not because you've lost the ability to dance, but because the music playing inside you is completely different from what everyone else seems to hear. This mismatch is not coincidence. It's the symptom of an era that has confused intensity with depth, noise with meaning, constant movement with real progress. Your exhaustion may be, paradoxically, a sign of your mental sanity in a context that has lost contact with the natural rhythms of human experience. Modern society has created a kind of artificial emotional calendar where certain dates come accompanied by mandatory scripts of feelings. New Year's occupies the top of this hierarchy, as if it were possible to restart the complexity of human existence with the simple turn of a page. This expectation completely ignores that emotional time follows completely different logic from chronological time. You may still be living in September, processing losses that happened months ago, while the world has already jumped to January, demanding that you show enthusiasm for futures you can't even imagine yet. This temporal lag is not laziness or resistance. It's the natural functioning of a psyche that needs real time to integrate real experiences, not artificial time imposed by social conventions. And you, have you felt that crushing weight of having to fake a joy that doesn't exist within you? That feeling of playing a role you never chose, smiling for photos while screaming with exhaustion inside. If you're going through this right now, if you feel you're behind on the world's expectations, leave in the comments. I am learning to respect my own time. Your courage in sharing this could be exactly the permission someone else needs to stop forcing themselves to feel what they don't feel. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply admitting that we're too tired to celebrate. What Kafka understood better than any other writer was how apparently harmless social structures can become invisible prisons of the soul. The pressure for New Year's happiness is one of these structures, subtle but suffocating, that transforms a date on the calendar into a mechanism of emotional control. You find yourself navigating a labyrinth where every corridor leads to the same demand. Be happy, be grateful, be optimistic, as if these emotions were buttons you could press with sufficient willpower. Most disturbing is that this pressure rarely comes from identifiable external sources. It infiltrates through thousands of social micro-interactions, social media posts, casual conversations, expectant looks, until you completely internalize the idea that your lack of enthusiasm is a personal failure that needs to be corrected. The Kafkaesque transformation that many experience during end-of-year festivities doesn't happen dramatically, but through a gradual metamorphosis where you slowly lose contact with your own authentic feelings. First, you notice you need to try a little harder to smile in photographs. Then you realize you're avoiding certain conversations because you can no longer fake interest in future plans. Slowly, you become a stranger in your own emotional life, observing from outside while your body executes the socially expected movements of someone who is celebrating. This alienation from yourself is perhaps one of the most subtle and cruel forms of psychological suffering, because it happens so gradually that when you finally notice, you no longer know where the performance ends and where your true essence begins. The emotional exhaustion that many carry is not simply fatigue. It's the result of months or years spending psychic energy in discord with their most basic needs. It's like forcing a plant that needs shade to grow under direct light. It may survive for a while, but eventually it will begin to wither no matter how much water you offer. Your soul may be asking for silence, introspection, a period of mourning for dreams that didn't come true, but the world around you continues offering parties, noise, demands for emotional productivity. This fundamental incompatibility between what you need and what is offered to you creates a constant tension that drains your vitality in ways you may not even consciously perceive. The most bitter irony of the pressure for joy at New Year's is that it happens precisely when many people most need permission to feel sadness, tiredness, or simply emotional neutrality. December is often the month when social masks become heaviest, when family obligations multiply, when the loneliness of those without family becomes more acute, when financial difficulties become more evident through the pressure for gifts and celebrations. It's as if society had chosen the moment of greatest collective emotional vulnerability to demand performance of happiness, creating a systemic cruelty that has little to do with the conscious intentions of the people involved, but much to do with cultural structures that have lost contact with the reality of human experience. The issue is not that you should be able to feel joy and cannot. The issue is that perhaps forced joy is a completely inappropriate emotion for where you find yourself in your existential journey at this moment. There is profound wisdom in recognizing when your emotional system is signaling the need for pause, reflection, or even mourning. Some phases of life require us to descend to the basement of ourselves, to temporarily inhabit darker territories of the psyche, not because we are negative people, but because it's there that certain types of healing and understanding happen that are impossible on the illuminated surface of social happiness. Your resistance to compulsory joy may be, in fact, an act of fidelity to your own inner truth. The Kafkaesque system of obligatory happiness works through a perverse mechanism, where the more you try to force joy, the more distant from it you become. But at the same time, the less joy you demonstrate, the more social pressure you receive to produce it. It's a self-feeding cycle, creating a downward spiral where you progressively lose access to your natural emotions. Like a character trapped in the Kafkaesque castle, you find yourself in infinite corridors, looking for the authority that can give you permission to feel what you really feel. But this authority always seems to be in the next room, behind the next door, after the next celebration you need to cross while smiling. Real spiritual transformation often requires that we pass through periods of apparent emotional dormancy, like seeds that need to rot in the darkness of the earth before they can sprout. Your exhaustion may be the psychological equivalent of this necessary rotting, a process of decomposition of old versions of yourself that no longer serve, but that have not yet been replaced by something new. This intermediate space between who you were and who you are becoming is naturally uncomfortable, and social pressure for joy makes this discomfort even more acute because it denies the legitimacy of this essential transitional phase. You are not broken for not being able to celebrate. You may be exactly where you need to be for a deeper renewal to happen. The existential loneliness that accompanies the inability to celebrate with others reveals fundamental aspects of the human condition that usually remain hidden during periods of normal social functioning. When you can no longer participate in collective rituals of optimism, you come face to face with questions that most people manage to avoid. What does it mean to be alive when life seems to have lost its flavor? How to continue existing when the future seems like a tiresome extension of the present? What kind of hope is possible when all conventional hopes have proven illusory? These are not questions for which easy answers exist, but they are, paradoxically, the beginning of a more authentic, spiritual journey than any manufactured enthusiasm could provide. New Year's, as a symbol of renewal, completely loses meaning when you find yourself in an emotional state where the very idea of renewal seems impossible. It's like offering fresh paint to someone who needs to first demolish the entire house and rebuild from the foundations. Your inability to get enthusiastic about promises of change may be a sign that you've developed a more mature perception about the real nature of human transformation. It doesn't happen by calendrical decree, but through slow, often painful processes that require patience with yourself and with the mystery of your own internal time. This resistance to superficial renewal may be, in fact, a wise protection against another round of optimistic self-deception. The experience of being exhausted while the world celebrates creates a particular form of alienation that Kafka would have recognized immediately. You become a foreigner in your own culture, observing from outside rituals in which you can no longer authentically participate. This position of forced observer, though painful, also offers a unique perspective on the absurdity of much of what our society considers normal and necessary. You begin to perceive how many of the emotions that people demonstrate publicly may be as performative as yours. How much of the celebrated joy may be as artificial as what you can no longer produce. This perception should not bring cynicism, but a deeper compassion both for yourself and for others, who may also be silently struggling with their own obligatory emotional performances. The time of exhaustion follows completely different logic from social time. While the world accelerates toward New Year's resolutions and goals, you may discover that you need to slow down even more, that you need more time to process not just the year that passed, but perhaps years of poorly digested experiences that have accumulated in your emotional system. This desynchronization is not a failure, it's a necessity. Some people need longer winters before their internal spring can begin. Forcing premature sprouting can result in weak growths that cannot sustain the weight of an authentic life. The pressure for New Year's joy also reveals how our culture has lost contact with the natural cycles of growth and rest that govern not only external nature, but also our internal emotional nature. Just as there are seasons in the natural world, there are seasons in the human soul, and some people arrive at the end of the year in full emotional winter, needing withdrawal, quietude, and the right to let certain parts of themselves die before others can be born. Demanding joy from someone who is in emotional winter is like demanding that trees bloom in January just because the number on the calendar changed. The journey back to emotional authenticity often begins with the simple but revolutionary recognition that you have the right to feel what you really feel, even if this doesn't correspond to social or calendrical expectations. This recognition may seem small, but it's the first step to exit the Kafkaesque prison of obligatory emotional performance. When you stop trying to convince yourself that you should feel joy and begin to explore what is really happening in your inner world, you open space to discover what types of emotions and experiences are genuinely necessary for your healing and growth at this specific moment of your life. The paradox is that the more you accept your current inability to celebrate, the closer you get to finding authentic forms of joy that don't depend on dates on the calendar or social approval. This joy, when it finally emerges, has a completely different quality. It springs from within, doesn't need to be sustained by external circumstances, and doesn't fear periods of absence because it knows it can return when appropriate. But to reach this mature joy, you first need to completely honor your right not to feel it when it simply isn't available. True spirituality is not about maintaining a constant state of positivity, but about developing the capacity to be present with the entire range of human experience without trying to manipulate or escape from any part of it. Your exhaustion in the face of demands for joy may be, paradoxically, an invitation to a more honest and deep relationship with yourself. Instead of trying to repair what you perceive as a failure in your ability to celebrate, perhaps it's time to ask what your soul really needs at this moment, and have the courage to offer that to yourself, even if it's completely different from what the world expects of you.